So I want to welcome you and thank you for participating in our online virtual training this evening for staff and supervisors. This is presented and hosted by the Indiana State Department of Agriculture District Support Specialists and your Indiana Association of Soil and Water Conservation District staff. I am Amy Work, the Communications and Member Programs Manager at the association. So the association has a board of directors that is made up from the 8 regions in the state. Each of the regions has a representative that represents you on our board. This is the last of our VirTuesday trainings that we are putting on with ISDA, and it is roles and responsibilities of district staff and supervisors. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started, and I apologize to those who were on the other VirTuesday sessions. This is going to be a little bit repetitive, so just bear with us as we get through it. And I've added a couple things in too, just so that you know. So this series will be recorded, and we did start recording this session now. That includes what the presenters are going to present and the chat box. Tonight's session will last about an hour. We will have an online evaluation link that will be emailed to you or to everyone who registered. We'll get that online evaluation link, and we do ask that you use that and give us feedback. And then these recordings will be posted on the iaswcd.org website. The first 2 VirTuesday trainings are already posted there now. It is on the what we call the 4 districts page. I'm going to give you a few training tips through Zoom. If you haven't used it before, you'll find this toolbar at the bottom that we were talking about earlier. And we'll look at the icons on that. And mostly you can see these icons on a computer. I'm not sure exactly what the phone experience shows, but on a computer or a laptop, PC or laptop, you can see this toolbar at the bottom. The first on the far left of the toolbar is the mute button. There's a small caret symbol next to the mute right there. If you click on that, you'll get some options, but really all you have to do is click on the microphone to mute and unmute yourself. And we do ask that you put yourself on mute at this time for the presentation. And then if you're having any issues, just go ahead and contact us through the chat box, and we'll see if we can help you out in that way. The second button controls your camera. It looks like a video camera, and you use that small caret symbol to turn your camera on and off. During the presentation, it might work better if everyone turns their video off, and then we can turn them on at the end of the presentation during Q&A if you would like to do that. This next icon says participants. If you click on this icon, you can view the list of participants that are actually at this presentation, and then the number signifies the number of participants in this session. So we had about 43 or 44 participants in our first 2, and tonight it looks like we are up to at least 55, 60 when I jumped on with my screen. So we beat the record of the first 2 sessions. But welcome and thank you for coming this evening. I hope you enjoy the experience. And there is a chat box, as we've been talking about, right there in the middle of your toolbar. You can use that now as a Q&A. So during this presentation, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. Everyone will be able to see those. If you toggle and make sure that the button says everyone, which is how we want it set, that way everyone can see each other's questions. And we will address the questions at the end of the presentation. I'll go through those with our presenters. And if you want to specify more details about your question, you can unmute yourself at that time and we can discuss those questions then. Do look at this yellow box over here. This is just a note asking you to put in the chat box if anyone else is watching the presentation with you. So for instance, if you're a staff person that's watching this presentation right now and you have a supervisor or additional staff sitting there with you, if you would just put a note about that in the chat box, that would be very helpful for us. It gives us an idea of how many people are actually watching this live and what the audience is like. There may be a button that says share screen, but this is really for presenters only that probably see this so that they can share the screen with you. The next button is a record button, and you probably don't see that one either. That's just so that we can record. There is a reactions button so that you can actually react by giving the speaker a thumbs up or a clap to something they may be presenting. It's just a way to encourage the speakers as we go along. And last but not least, the leave button. And this is if you need to leave the presentation during or at the end of the presentation, you just click on that red leave button and you can exit the presentation that way. One last reminder, the annual conference of Indiana SWCDs, as you've probably heard by now, is going to be a virtual conference in January 11th and 12th. Stay tuned for further details. And I did look today, it's 124 more days, just in case you were wondering. Also, like I had said earlier, we are going to be sending out an evaluation. If you want to jot down this URL, feel free to do that, but you don't need to, as I will send the link out to everyone who is registered tomorrow morning, and then you can click on that to give us your feedback on what you thought about this training. Please know that we read every single one of them. Your feedback is invaluable to us as we plan future trainings and what needs we have out there for you guys. So now I would like to introduce our presenters for this evening. We have Brad Dawson, who currently serves as president of the Indiana State Soil Conservation Board. He's a past ISWCD board member and past supervisor of the Dearborn County SWCD, where he currently serves as an associate supervisor. He lives with his wife and has 2 daughters and a son. In his real life, he's a sales rep for Finn All Seasons, which specializes in erosion and sediment control. You will also be hearing from Geneva Tyler and Laura Fribley, both employed with the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. Geneva started as a resource specialist and then after a year became a district support specialist, where she's been for the past 8 years. She has a Bachelor of Science in Agronomy from Purdue and lives in Marion County with her husband and 3 children. Laura has a natural resources degree from Ball State University. She's been employed with ISDA since 2006, working for the Madison County SWCD prior to that. She lives in Floyd County with her husband and 2 kiddos. So please welcome them all to our virtual stage. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me, everyone? Thank you, Amy. I'm usually not a big fan of these Zoom meetings with how great the broadband is in rural Indiana. But then I started thinking about the bright side. My pants don't have to match my shirt. I really don't have to wear pants, just joking. I figured I'd be like Roger Winning, your association president, and just sport the shorts and flip-flops. So on behalf of the State Soil Board, I would like to take the time to thank you for participation in this webinar, Roles and Responsibilities of District Staff and Supervisors. By you taking the time to participate, it shows your dedication to your position. As for my part of this presentation, I would like to talk a little bit about the State Soil Board, who we are, who you are, being effective, and State Soil Board goals. The State Soil Conservation Board was established within the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. The State Soil Conservation Board provides guidance and coordination to the state's 92 soil and water conservation districts, as they provide local leadership in the protection of Indiana's soil and water resources. Additionally, the State Soil Conservation Board administers the Clean Water Indiana Grants Program, a water quality related erosion and sediment reduction program. The current board consists of 7 members, 4 from farming interest and 3 from non-farming interest. Our current board consists of Warren Baird, Amy Burris, Kenny Kane, Ray Chatton, Larry Clemens, Bob Edelman, and myself. The mission of the State Soil Board, State Soil Conservation Board, is to provide information, advice, consultation, and resources to the Soil and Water Conservation District supervisors and staff to assist them in carrying out their powers and programs. That's who we are. Who are you? You are the action heroes, the face of conservation, the legs and minds on the ground. You are the VIPIC, VIPIC. How can I do a presentation of this group without adding another acronym for you to learn? The VIPIC is the very important partners in conservation. When you were approached about being a supervisor, you were probably told it's only one meeting a month. I know I was. I don't mean to scare you off, but it's much more than that. It is 24/7, 365 days a year position, a responsibility. Wow, that's more than I signed up for. But think of it this way. I would hope that soil and water conservation would still be 24/7, 365 days a year thing for you, even if you weren't a supervisor or a staff member. Soil and water conservation, it's a way of life, a thing you like to talk about, a thing you like to educate about, a thing you like to lead by example. Your heart has to be in it. And to be blunt, if your heart isn't in it, maybe this position is not for you. In life, we are asked to do many things, but if our heart isn't in it, do we get the satisfaction we deserve? Do we accomplish the goals that we set forth? Do we really make a difference? Some of your boards may be looking for new supervisors. I am a firm believer in having a diverse board. Diverse perspectives from a group of people means tackling the same idea from various angles. A diverse board can create great ideas. New perspectives make boards open to the needs of a wider array of groups. Boards can be comprised of young and old, men and women, anyone with a common goal of soil and water conservation. And if your heart isn't in it anymore, don't be afraid to step down from a board. Have your board working to find a replacement for your position. Find that one person that has the drive, the energy, the passion to fill your shoes. I realize sometimes it's hard to find those replacement board members, but the goal of your board should be to have the best, most effective board you can. Your service will not be forgotten. Whether you were on the board 1 term or 15 terms, you have made a difference, and it is very much appreciated. But people's lives change. New jobs, family circumstances, health issues, wanting to start a new chapter in your life. We get it. Allow your board and district to be the best and most effective that they can be. So the State Soil Conservation Board has identified the following statewide priority natural resource concerns to be addressed over the next 5 years on our board. They are water quality, soil health and degradation, invasive species, erosion and stream bank erosion, and building district capacity and accountability. Some of our high-level goals are engage supervisors to be effective leaders in their communities and their state level, increase local SWCD capacity to be effective partners in the Indiana Conservation Partnership, delivery of conservation across the state. Also, keeping elected officials from the local level to the state level informed on conservation progress and needs in order to reach statewide goals, and continue developing strategic plans for Clean Water Indiana funding. As the state board continues to address these goals over the next 5 years, we need your help to accomplish them. As we wish to help you accomplish your goals. Indiana has built a great partnership for conservation. Indiana's soil and water districts have a phenomenal state association to support and guide them in their endeavors. Your district's support specialists are just a phone call or email away. And you can also reach out to any of the State Soil Conservation Board members. As you participate in this training webinar, the roles and responsibilities of district staff and supervisors, be thinking of how you can take your district to the next level. My wish is that all 92 districts make a huge impact for conservation in Indiana. Have your heart in it and make your board and district the best it can be. Thank you. I will now pass it on to Geneva and Laura.
Thank you, Brad. I'm going to share my screen and then we'll get started. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. As Amy said, I'm Geneva Tyler with the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. Tonight, Laura and I are going to cover the roles and responsibilities of supervisors and staff, but we also wanted to briefly discuss some history and background of the soil and water conservation districts, especially for those who are newer. In addition, we'll wrap up the evening discussing how districts are able to impact your local community. So in 1935, the Soil Conservation Act was put into place. This established the Soil Conservation Service, which has since evolved into the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Under Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Soil Conservation Districts Law was passed in 1937, and this implemented and gave farmers subsidies to plant native grasses and trees or raise vegetables rather than commercial crops. In 1940, the first Soil and Water Conservation District in Indiana was established in Vanderburgh County. And today we have 92 soil and water conservation districts serving rural and urban communities throughout Indiana. So with that in mind, with 92 districts through the state of Indiana, that means there are 460 supervisors, and we now have over 200 district staff through the state. And nationally, there are almost 3,000 conservation districts. As supervisors, you are a part of something big and you can make a difference. So now we are going to have a few pop questions to briefly poll your knowledge. There we go. All right, launch polling. So everyone on the screen should be able to see 3 questions in front of you. Amy, can you see that? Okay. So please, if you can, answer questions 1, 2, or 3. They're 3 true/false questions, and then we'll discuss them in here in just a few seconds. Okay, I'll give everyone about 10 more seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause, and then we'll go through the questions. All right, so the first question was a true-false question. Well, they were all true-false questions. So the first one said, in order to qualify as a soil and water conservation supervisor, both appointed and elected supervisors must have training experience to fulfill the position. And the answer to that one is actually true. In district law, it states that to hold the position of elected or appointed supervisor, an individual must be qualified by training and experience to perform the duties that this article imposes on supervisors. Beyond that, elected and appointed supervisor qualifications are slightly different. To be an elected supervisor, an individual must be an occupier of a tract of land that is located within the district and must maintain the individual's permanent residence within the district. To qualify to be an appointed supervisor, an individual must be of voting age and must maintain that individual's permanent residence within the district. Second question. A qualified elector is any U.S. citizen 18 years of age and older, resides in the district, and is a land occupier. And that is true, and that an individual of voting age or representative of a firm, limited liability company, or corporation that owns or rents land or property located within the district and county may vote. Eligible individuals also include the owner and tenant of the same land or property, as well as any owner's or tenant's spouse. It looks like the majority of everyone got that one correct. And the third question of this round was also true/false, that elected supervisors serve a 3-year term while appointed supervisors serve 4-year terms. It looks like the vast majority got number 3 correct. That is false. That the district law states that the term length of appointed and elected supervisors is 3 years. If a position becomes vacant, an individual's length of service will vary. All supervisor terms are 3 years and are staggered. In the event of a vacancy, a temporary supervisor will fill an elected position until the next election. Whoever is elected to that position will continue through the end of the vacated position, not an automatic 3 years. In the event that an appointed supervisor in the event that an appointed supervisor position is vacated, the temporary replacement will continue through the end of that term. If you have a vacancy and have questions about the temporary appointment term length, please contact your district support specialist. Please remember, when residents elect supervisors, they are delegating the responsibility of directing the conservation needs of district's natural resources. So now that we've discussed some qualifications, let's talk about duties and responsibilities, what we're here for tonight. So we pulled out key points for tonight's purposes. For a full list of what's in code, please visit Indiana Code 14-32-4. So supervisors may employ and supervise personnel, and the supervisors are the governing body of the district with power to manage the personnel. Human resources related issues such as hiring, salaries, and disciplinary procedures are usually done in close partnership with county leaders. Supervisors may delegate the powers and duties to the chairman, other supervisors, and/or any number of agents or employees. In order to delegate a power or duty, the supervisors should take board action and note the vote in board minutes. One example of delegating a power would be allowing staff to sign conservation plans instead of a supervisor. District law also states that supervisors shall also provide for the execution of surety bonds for all district employees and officers who are entrusted with money or property. A surety bond is a promise to be liable for the debt, default, or failure of another, and the bond is a requirement in district law, and State Board of Accounts would request documentation of the bond in an audit. Bonds may be issued through the county or through a separate policy. Supervisors shall also provide for the keeping of a full and accurate record of all district proceedings and of all district resolutions and orders issued or adopted. These may be minutes taken during official board meetings and/or other office records. Supervisors shall also provide for an annual audit of the accounts and receipts of disbursements of the district. This is an internal audit and takes place after the annual financial report has been prepared. 2 supervisors are appointed to review the annual financial report and sign it upon completion. It is also statute that the annual financial report be submitted by March 31st. Currently, in practice, these AFRs are submitted to the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. This should not be confused with the audits performed by State Board of Accounts, which occur about every 3 years and is more of an external audit. As Brad mentioned and talked about earlier, I wanted to reiterate that you are public officials and not volunteers. As such, supervisors are accountable to state and federal laws. A few examples of federal laws would be anything that has to do with federal taxes, labor laws, and equal opportunity laws. Likewise, you are accountable to state laws such as sales tax laws and State Board of Accounts accountability. Ultimately, the bottom line is, as supervisors, you are responsible for the district, but you have many resources available to you via the Indiana Conservation Partnership. In order to best manage the district, board meetings and functions should be regularly attended, and supervisors should take an active role in overseeing employees' activities. I'm going to switch gears for a moment and discuss powers and duties of the district. Again, this is definitely not an all-encompassing list, but we pulled out a few key points. For a more complete list, please see Indiana Code 14-32-5. The first bullet point on this screen is what the Soil and Water Conservation District mission boils down to, in my opinion, addressing soil erosion and water runoff. And it states, powers and duties of districts may carry out soil erosion and water runoff preventative and control measures within the district. Districts are also able to obtain real or personal property or rights or interest in property. Examples of property may include office buildings, districts or vehicles, drills, but can't incur debt beyond available money. Districts may also make and execute contracts and other instruments necessary or convenient to the exercise of the district's powers. And districts may also develop or participate in the development of comprehensive plans for the proper management of soil and water resources within the district. Now we have two more questions. Here we go. All right, launch polling. You should be able to see two more questions. The first one says, the chair sets the meeting agenda, true or false? And the second one says, staff make the decision to apply for grants or not apply for grants. Again, true or false? I'll give you 10 more seconds before I close.
We need to have Jeopardy music here going.
I know. All right, I'm gonna go ahead. It looks like almost everybody has voted. So I'm gonna end the polling. You guys are on top of this. So let's see if I can get back to my slideshow. Okay, so question one here. The chairperson sets meeting agendas. That is true. So I realize oftentimes the staff puts together the agenda, but actually that is a supervisor duty. The chair receives input from others and assembles the agenda. Second question. Again, true or false? The staff make the decision to apply for a grant or not apply for a grant. That would be false. And it looks like the vast majority of you got that one correct. So the district supervisors are responsible for the operation and management of the district. They develop policy, which is carried out by employees and personnel available to the district. This also carries back to the responsibility of managing personnel and workloads, as well as managing the district finances. All right, Laura, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Geneva. Hi, everyone. Geneva's offered to kind of run the slideshow tonight. So if you could advance to the next slideshow, Geneva, thank you. So what I'm going to kick off is talk a little bit about board officers. And to start, kind of, why is this important? And as supervisors or board members, your participation in the district functions and monthly meetings, workshops, the different events that you do, all of that is really important to the effectiveness of the district program. And another way to look at it is each of you is 1/5 of that governing effort that keeps your district on track and productive as well. So each of us as board members is valuable and has a critical role. One thing, if you look at district law, the one thing that district law does say is that it requires the supervisors to designate a chairman. So that's as much as it says, but I would recommend that you delegate some officers beyond that. So tonight I'll cover 4 officers. That'd be the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, and the treasurer. And another interesting thing that district law says is that the supervisors can delegate these powers and duties as they deem proper. So those duties can go to the chair, it can go to the other supervisors, it can go to any number of agents or employees. And I took that directly out of Indiana Code. And then some of you as well have additional members that are involved, such as associate supervisors, or you might have different committees that work on things. So there are ways to kind of disperse that work out, so to speak, and get others involved. But ultimately, the supervisors are the ones that make those decisions. So for those of you who are good at multitasking, I'm going to cover with these officer roles kind of more task-oriented tips or suggestions of things that each district could think about. But if you can, what I'd like for folks to do is enter into the chat box things that they think are important, like, man, he or she is a really great board member because of this or that. And then we can look at those later. And if you can't multitask, we can worry about that another time. So again, I'm going to cover these 4 roles. These are just suggestions. They're not in Indiana Code. Okay, next slide, please.
Hey, Laura, this is
Yes.
Amy. Sorry to interrupt. Tell me again what you want in the chat box, and I'll put that in there to remind people.
What attendees think makes a great board member?
Okay, got it.
Thank you, Amy. So I have a funny old Monopoly game card up here. It's from the 1950s. And for those of you calling in, it has a picture of a board and it says, Chance, you have been elected chairman, board of the directors. Pay each player $50. And that kind of made me laugh because I think in some of the meetings I've been to, it might really be the other way around. You might be paying the chair to take on that role. So I thought that was funny. We certainly, I feel like the chair does have a little more workload and responsibility than maybe some of the others, depending on what's going on. So some of the things that the chair would be responsible for is leading all of the district meetings. There's different state policy that board chair would need to be aware of, and then as well as any local policy or practices that the district has accepted. Also, that chair calls the meeting to order on time and then assures that quorum is present. So for our world, quorum would be 3 supervisors. That chair also presides over all district meetings, and it announces the business before the board in its proper order, and then also preserves that order and decorum and helps make sure things move forward. Now, ultimately, that may fall back on the chair, but I do encourage everyone, it's so easy to get off track on meetings, and all of us can have a part in helping that meeting stay on track. Okay, next slide, please. So some more duties of the board chair. Your signature, we need that a lot so you can authenticate things with your signature. The chair calls for a vote on the all properly presented motions. And sometimes that chair does vote. I think, a lot of times the chair tries to remain neutral or doesn't vote, but with us having a quorum of 3, they do sometimes vote. Another key role as a chair is getting that input from others. So reaching out to those other supervisors, those staff, agency partners, et cetera, maybe volunteers or other groups that you work closely with, and getting that information for the agenda, as well as just how things are going in general. That communication is really key for a chair. And then also acts or appoints a liaison between the board and the SWC supervisors. So supervisors, I would particularly encourage, as you have new staff come on board, they need lots of help. So those regular touch-ins, either from you or if the board appoints someone else, new staff really appreciate hearing from supervisors regularly, or if you're in a shared office building and you're popping over to see FSA, for example, go ahead and drop by for a few minutes just informally to say hello to staff. All right, next, please. All right, so thinking about the board chore, man, like the chair had so much, and then this vice chair only has a couple bullets on my slide. So it looks like the vice chair gets off easy, but this individual would be familiar with all of the duties of the chair. And then if the chair was absent from the meeting, he or she, the vice chair, would step up. So just something to consider. Again, a vice chair is not required in state law, but it certainly can help your board be more efficient. Okay, next, please. So the next two slides, I'm going to talk about some suggestions for what a board secretary could do, and then also a board treasurer. Again, these aren't required in law. And if you look at this stuff, I think in many situations, a supervisor or staff might think, this is what the staff does. But you can certainly, I think as staff maybe doing more of the day-to-day duties, whereas a board member might be looking more big picture. So it is possible to differentiate between the two. So if you were serving as secretary, you, like the vice chair, would want to be familiar with the duties of the chair. And then if that chair and vice chair were absent, you would actually step up and you would be the chair for those meetings, for example. More specific, kind of looking at all written reports that come in, maybe being the one that takes a closer eye at the last month's minutes or other related reports. And also paying attention to open door, is everything being followed? So everyone's here tonight, I think, to make sure they're doing everything that they should. This summer, we had a really great open door law presentation, and it is available on YouTube. Really interesting. Luke Britt, with a public access counselor, hit on all the key topics. So if you want to make sure you're doing everything right, so to speak, you can visit that, and your district support specialist can get you those links if you don't have it. And then also thinking about that annual report that the district publishes every year, that is a requirement to do at your annual meeting. So the secretary could get involved with that and kind of help finalize that draft. All right, next, please. So kind of switching duties here to looking at what a treasurer would do, supervising the paying of the bills of the district, presenting that treasurer's report at the monthly board meetings. That person could sign and verify bank statements. They may also be that individual that's at the bank on that official paperwork. And each year your district has to do an internal annual audit. Now, to clarify, that's different again than what the State Board of Accounts comes in and audits you every few years. This is something you do internally, but making sure that the audit is complete, maybe even touching base with staff through the year, waiting until the end of the year to make sure everything balances can be difficult. We recommend looking at that, monthly or every couple months. And then also looking at your internal control policies. So you may have something locally that would tie into a treasurer. So those could be tying back to the individual. So again, it's just kind of to step back, looking at each of you as a board member, sharing that 1/5 of responsibilities, and then deciding kind of how all these different officer roles could play out. These are suggestions. As you have new board members come on, I'd encourage you to think about, do we have any sort of outline of what our expectations are? Do we have any sort of orientation so that as these board members accept these roles, they have an indication of what they need to be looking for? So I'll pause. We had quite a bit of chat come through, so thank you. I know there's people probably phoning in tonight, so I'll just read a few. Again, these comments could be viewed later, but so we asked the question, what would make a great supervisor? So here's one: have an attitude. The SWC is responsible for getting the public educated about soil erosion, water quality, and invasive weeds. I'll just kind of, an individual who is interested in conservation is willing to help out with the district activities, so the staff is not the only people representing the district. And I'll read just one more. Someone who shows up, gives ideas, and engages in conversation, helps make connections between the SWC and local farmers or local needs, and ask questions. So I'd agree, those are all great characteristics of board members. I mean, we have so many great board members out there. I thank you for all the time that you put in every month. And thank you to the group for putting some items in. Okay, I'm going to kind of switch gears here. Jenny, if you could go to the next slide, please. Fiscal officer, in many cases, this is probably going to be a staff person. And each year you should annually designate that fiscal officer. And this individual does have specific responsibilities. So one of them is entering reports into Gateway. If you are new, I have up there on the screen, you would need to get registered as that fiscal officer. And you can email that email, your name, title, your local unit name, which is your SWC, and then what county you're in, and they'll get you hooked up. There is end of year reporting that will be required. So if you're newer, you want to sign up there. And Gateway is just something that the public can access to see how our funds are budgeted and spent. So it's just kind of transparency for our constituents. And also that duties of the fiscal officer, you'll want to certify that the minimum internal control standards have been met. And that personnel have received the training. So next slide, please. So if you're not familiar with internal control, the State Board of Accounts has a whole website on it. Your district would have a policy that was developed. And one thing I want to point out is we've had this come up at least a couple of times in audits recently. And if you go to the State Board of Accounts website, and then you go to the internal control section, there is a video that you can watch. It's about 27 minutes long. And then there's also a certification form you can print to show that you have done this. So fiscal officers, absolutely watch this and have it. If you can't find that paperwork, just watch it again. You will want to have that. And then and your supervisors, you need to watch that as well if you haven't already. Okay, next slide, please. So personnel, what does it say in Indiana code? It says that supervisors may employ, determine qualifications and duties, and supervise personnel. So thinking about your district, what I'd encourage you to do is periodically look at the vision. You know, what is the vision of your district, and then think about what kind of staff that you need. Do your current staff need training? As positions overturned, do we need to rewrite that job description? Does that job description still look good? I encourage you to update that, certainly when staff change, but definitely also on a regular basis as well. And then regular performance evaluations, we encourage you to do those as well. And it doesn't always have to be, or I should say, it shouldn't just be that formal one time a year sit down. For example, touch base through the year, have those communications to see how things are going on both ends. Okay, next slide, please. Also in Indiana code, it talks about the county and consolidated city employees. So as a district employee, or I should say an employee of the county, just be aware there's probably a county handbook and other employee guidelines that you'll need to follow. And then also, if you are a district that has hired a grant employee or a contractor, just be aware there are certain guidelines that you would need to be familiar with, such as the IRS. There is a link there where you could go to help you determine whether or not you're hiring an employee or a contractor. They mean different things. And when it comes to supervision too, that is the responsibility of the district supervisors, or they might have delegated that in an office with multiple staff to an individual, but that does not fall on the shoulders of other partner employees, for example. That is your responsibility. Okay, next, please. So we're going to look at two different staff. These are very general positions, like our generalized positions. So around the state, we have districts with one part-time person, sometimes a part-time contractual person, and then we have other districts that have up to 8 different staff, some part-time, some full-time. So each district looks a little different, but I wanted to touch on some of the more common traditional roles, and that would be administrative staff, and then also technical staff. So if your job is more administrative in nature, some of the things that you might do would be looking at helping with those monthly board meetings, helping with cooperative agreements or contracts with partners, helping work those tasks, those day-to-day things, keeping up with the financials, assisting the board with the grant processes, and then also, I mentioned this earlier, but supervising any additional staff or volunteers. There's probably 100 things we could add here, of course. Staff, you all have a lot of responsibilities as well. And sort of like what I did with supervisors, before we go to the next slide, again, for you multitaskers, what do you think makes a great staff person? Regardless of what their title might be, what do you think makes a great staff person? Okay, next slide, please. So another general role we have those technicians out there. So districts were created to get conservation on the ground, and we have our technical staff on the ground to help us accomplish those tasks. So they're out there working with producers and landowners as outlined by the board and in their job description. They're partnering with other agency staff, including NRCS and the other members of the tech teams. And they're also assisting the boards with grants. So we have Clean Water Indiana grants, we have IDEM 319 grants, we have other cooperative agreements. Our technicians help us out a lot as well. And then our district technical staff, they're also great at obtaining or identifying possible funding or grant opportunities we could go after. So I'm going to look at our chat just to see what makes a great staff person, and let's see if we had anything come in here.
I don't think we've had anything come in regarding a great staff person yet. Oh, here comes one. But somebody did ask a question about providing the link for the IRS contractual employee.
Okay. If we could go back a couple of slides, oh, do you mean provide it in the chat probably? Okay.
Yes, they want to provide it in the chat. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I can grab it from the slideshow and put it in there, Laura. I'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Here's one about the staff people, though, that you can read if you want.
A great staff person would be passionate about conservation, knowledgeable about their duties, or able to learn, responsible and cooperative about working with the community board and all. Awesome, I agree. Staff, you do a lot of stuff, and we sure appreciate you as well. So thank you, Laura. Okay, next slide, please. So we've talked a lot of jobs or tasks, and I also wanted to point out tonight about being that face of the community. So each of you represents the district in everything you do, whether you're a supervisor or you're a staff person, you're that face of our conservation and district. I'd encourage you to be present, not just physically, but maybe mentally when you're at district activities and other pertinent events. And let's say you attend a cover crop workshop that your district is hosting. Maybe you don't need to learn about cover crops, for example. You might be well versed in that topic, but remember that you're also there to mingle with the different attendees and meeting neighbors or people that you haven't seen before. Supervisors, I encourage you to visit your staff folks, your staff at these events. You showing up means a lot to them. And in terms of community members, people want to hear from you. And also another way to thinking about this would be you manage resources, but you lead people. So each of you as leaders are leaders, whether you're staff or supervisors. All right, next slide, please. And kind of some different ways that you can also be that face of the community is seeking input. So every year you might, for example, put out some kind of a survey at your annual meeting, or maybe at different field days through the year to get the public's feedback. You have your locally led EQIP ranking meeting, and that's specific to some certain programs, but then some districts actually, before starting their business plan, they have a locally led meeting as well. And again, it's separate from that EQIP ranking meeting, but just kind of hearing or giving the public an opportunity to come out and give input. Some other things are really taking advantage of all the resources that are out there for you, providing financial assistance to your community, and then also, of course, maybe the harder part is finding those funding sources. Those grants are sometimes they take a lot of time, so we appreciate when you go after these funds and try to bring dollars back home. And then also providing those services like a rental equipment or some of the other things that you sell. Sometimes you may make a little money. I think a lot of times you're breaking even or maybe just providing that service, but having the opportunity for people if they don't have those rental equipment pieces, for example, of coming to your place. And then also just informing others about the SWCD advocating for conservation, having those little conversations. Okay, next slide, please. So at this point, Brad, Geneva, and I, we are here to take your questions. And I'll also add, there are some topics that we talked about tonight that probably could be entire trainings on in themselves. So also feel free to reach out to your local district support specialist as well. So do we have any questions out there?
Feel free to put any questions you may have in the chat box. And if you don't have access to that in an easy manner, you can also unmute yourself and ask a question. That would be fine as well. I believe we do have a question there now, Laura.
Okay, so Judy asked, could you elaborate on the difference between the treasurer and the fiscal officer, please? Okay, so the fiscal officer, I would think of that, I'm assuming in your case that would be you, Judy. So your fiscal officer is probably always going to be a staff. Now, I don't want to paint every district like that because some districts don't have full-time staff, and so that might be a board member, but that fiscal officer is the one that's registered and turns in your gateway reports. They would turn in your annual financial reports. Again, kind of that day-to-day activity that a staff member would do, whereas I would look at the difference between that and then the board member. The board member would probably be more big picture, maybe not doing those day-to-day or week-to-week things, but paying more attention. Again, maybe that person as set forth in your internal control policy, maybe that board member comes in and looks at the bank statements or just some of the, maybe takes a closer look at that financial report that's presented each month to the board. You know, maybe that treasurer would serve on your local internal audit committee each year. So those are just some very general, I guess, ideas or suggestions, but I think there certainly can be a distinction between you as a staff person and then a board member who has that role. Does that help at all, Judy? Are there any other questions?
Well, Judy did add at the end of her question, she said, so the treasurer should be a supervisor, question mark?
I think you need to go back and kind of look at those roles and what you would want out of a supervisor if you gave them that title. There are some board members, for example, who are the ones that present that financial report each month at the monthly meeting. And then in some cases, it's the district staff. So again, that's one of those things that's going to vary from district to district. But I think you could certainly have a board member, you know, if the financial side of things were kind of their forte, something that they're good at, maybe that's the person that you pull in to deal, not to deal, that's the wrong word, to look at the financials a little more closely and take on some roles.
And then we do have another question. Can a district invoke term limits for supervisors?
They could. So there's nothing in state law that says anything about term limits, other than I suppose when you become a supervisor, you have that 3-year term, or if you're filling in a position, maybe up to that next annual meeting. This comes up periodically. I'm not aware of any SWC that has term limits. It's been discussed. If I'm incorrect, please go ahead and add in the chat if you know someone who does that. And kind of all, actually even heard of a board one time who thought it might help attract supervisors to that position, because they knew that then people would know they weren't signing up for a lifetime commitment, so to speak. And then your officers too, to kind of take a spin off of that. If someone is named chair, does your district have a formal policy? Can that person be a chair as long as they're doing a great job and everyone's in favor, or does your chair want to alternate that every year who is serving in that role? We have districts who do it both ways. So again, kind of a local decision.
And then Laura, we have a question that came in about some boards get stipends and other boards choose not to. Is there a right or wrong? And correct me if I'm wrong, but according to state law, board members are entitled to the stipend, the per diem, but board members may choose not to. I don't know that there's a right or wrong to that. I think that's an individual board and supervisor's choice. And then we also had a question come in about, when does an appointed supervisor's term begin? At the January State Soil Conservation Board meeting, the State Soil Conservation Board approves the appointed supervisors. And so at that point, they are approved and they may take the oath of office. Usually we see appointed supervisors take the oath at your annual meeting.
Yeah, the annual meeting is generally key.
There was a question, Lillian, do you mean salary per diem? That's what I was referring to.
So the salary per diem, you can get up to $35 per day for when you're engaged in business of the district. So some boards take 0, some take 35, some take 20. It kind of just depends locally. And then some board members just say, I don't want the money. So sometimes even within the board, you'll have a difference. But yes, there's also, besides that salary per diem, you're also, I'm trying to think, I guess subsistence per diem might be the best way to label it. So if you go to a training, for example, and you have to grab lunch along the way, or you have to pay $10 to attend, you can get reimbursed for that as well. And those are two different things.
I see a question, Julie. Does the annual board meeting have to happen in January, or can it be February? So the answer to that, Julie, is annual board meetings must take place in the first quarter. So it can take place anywhere between January and March 31st.